Hey guys, welcome back to more HOA malicious compliance Reddit stories. In this Ripe Stories video, imagine losing 3 years of your life to a horrific accident only to return to your property and find 36 houses sitting where your retirement cabin was supposed to be. The HOA thought they could bully a brain injury survivor into giving up, but instead I used their own massive greed against them and things took a 360-degree turn. Let's dive right into the HOA Karen's story. And the first one is the title story, which was posted on our /malicious_compliance and is titled HOA built 36 homes on my mountain property without my permission. Here is how I dealt with it. So my grandpa bought a chunk of land up on the side of a mountain a very long time ago, back when nobody wanted that kind of property because you couldn't really farm it and it was a pain to build on. He got it cheap though. We are talking a big piece of land, sloped, mostly trees, with a couple of clearings and one spot near the top with a view that would make you cry. It is so pretty. He left it to my dad and my dad left it to me. I never did much with it. I would just go up there to camp sometimes, maybe clear some brush, just walk around and feel close to the people who came before me. I always had this vague plan that maybe someday I would build a little cabin up there and retire, but that was just a dream anyway. The land sat right next to a development that went up over the years, a bunch of nice houses, you know, the kind with 3-car garages and lawns that get cut by a service, and of course where there are houses like that, there's a homeowner association. Basically, they had their little community, their pool, their walking trails, all of it, and my land butted right up against the back edge of their neighborhood. We had a fence line and everything, even though most of my land was just wild and theirs was manicured. For years, the HOA people would occasionally bug me about the state of my property. They didn't like that it was wooded, they didn't like that I had an old gate that was not painted. They sent me a couple of those notices about how my land was lowering property values because it looked like nature instead of a golf course. Well, I ignored them. I mean, my land was not part of their association, so they had zero authority over me, and a lawyer my dad used years back had made that crystal clear once they tried to pull something. So I would toss their notices and move on with my life. Now, here's where everything goes sideways though. I was in a bad car accident. I'm not going to go into all of it because it still messes me up to think about it, but the short version is I got hit by a truck that ran a red light and I ended up in a coma. Not a quick thing either. I was out for 3 years. 3 years of my life just gone. My wife stayed by my side the whole time, which is its own story and the reason I'll do anything for that woman until the day I die, and the doctors basically wrote me off more than once. There were forms signed, conversations had, the whole 9 yards, but I came back. Slowly, but I did come back, and when you wake up from something like that, your brain is mush for a while. I didn't even understand at first how much time had passed. I kept thinking it just had been weeks. When my wife finally told me it had been 3 years, I didn't believe her. I thought she was confused or that this was all part of some dream I was gonna wake up from. It took days for it to really land that 3 years of my life were just gone. People I knew had moved, the price of everything had changed. It's a strange thing to lose that much time and have the world keep spinning without you. Then you're just trying to relearn how to walk, hold a fork and so on, and the land was the last thing on my mind. My wife had been dealing with all the bills and the house and keeping our lives from completely falling apart, so the mountain property was not even on her radar either. I mean, why would it be? It was just sitting there like it always had, or so we thought. The property taxes on it were tiny because it was undeveloped and they'd been on automatic payment for years, so that never popped up as a problem. Nobody had any reason to go drive up a mountain and check on a bunch of trees. So yeah, a lot of time goes by after I wake up, I do rehab, I get strong enough to drive again, which felt like winning the lottery, and one day when I finally felt up to it, I told my wife I wanted to go see the land. I wanted to stand up there and breathe and just remember who I was before the accident. She drove me up because I still was not great for long trips. We get up the mountain road and I'm getting more excited the closer we get because this place is in my blood. We round the last bend. And then there are houses on my land. Not one, not two, houses, a whole development full of them, in various stages of being built. Some were finished with siding and windows, some were just frames. There were trucks, there was equipment, and there were piles of lumber and stacks of those big spools of wire. There was a brand new paved road cutting right through where I used to camp. The clearing where I was gonna build my cabin had a half-finished 2-story house sitting in it, and I genuinely thought I was simply confused. I figured my brain might be playing tricks on me, that maybe I'd gotten the location wrong, that this was somebody else's place. I made my wife pull over, and I just sat there staring. She was as stunned as I was. She kept saying she had no idea, that nobody had ever contacted her about anything, and that there'd been no letters, no calls, simply nothing. I got out of the car, shaky as I was, and walked up to one of the workers, and I asked him what was going on here, who was building all of this, and he told me it was a new section of the neighborhood development and that the HOA had expanded the community up the mountain. He said it so casual, like it was the most normal thing in the world. He pointed me towards a guy in a polo shirt who turned out to be some kind of site manager or something, and I asked the polo shirt guy who owned this land. He looked at me like I had two heads and said, "The HOA did, obviously." He said it like I was an idiot for even asking. I did not make a scene. I want you to understand that because it matters for what comes next. Every part of me wanted to start flipping over toolboxes, but I had just an eternity relearning how to breathe on my own, and I was not about to have a stroke on a construction site, so I just nodded, said okay, got back in the car, and my wife asked me what we were gonna do. I told her I needed to think. That night I dug out the old paperwork, the deed, the survey records and everything my dad had passed down to me, all of it sitting in a box in our closet, exactly where it had been the whole time I was unconscious, and there it was, plain as day. The land was mine, free and clear, my name on it, the legal description matching the mountain parcel, the whole thing just airtight. There was no mortgage, no lien, nothing. It had been in my family for 3 generations. There was absolutely no version of reality where the HOA owned that land, so how on earth were there 3 dozen houses on it? I went down to talk to the HOA in person. I figured maybe there had been some massive clerical mix-up, some surveyor error, something I could just clear up with one conversation and a copy of my deed. I really did try to do this the calm, reasonable way first. I sat in their little office with the HOA president and a couple of the board members. And by the way guys, just to quickly interject here, OP is definitely way more calm than I would have been. If I came to my private property and saw dozens of houses there, I could definitely not stay calm. Let me know in the comments how you would have reacted to that situation. And by the way, if you enjoy the malicious compliance stories, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel and maybe even like the video if you want to support me. Thank you so much. So I explained who I was, that the land was mine, and that I had been in a coma and had only just found out about the construction. I had a copy of my deed with me. I slid it across the table, and the HOA president barely looked at it. She told me that the land had been absorbed into the community, while the property was abandoned. She used that word, abandoned, like I just walked away from my family's land instead of being unconscious in a hospital bed fighting for my life. She said that because nobody had been paying attention to the parcel and there had been no activity on it for years, the association had taken it over to develop it for the good of the community. I said that's not how any of this works. You cannot just take someone's land because they were not using it for a few years. She then got this smug look on her face and told me their attorney had assured them everything was perfectly legal. And guys, maybe their attorney is Saul Goodman or something, I'm not sure. Anyway, she said something about how the land had effectively reverted to the community and that I no longer had any claim to it. She suggested, and this is the part that really got to me, that if I had a problem with it, I could take it up with their lawyers. Like she was just dying for me to try. One of the board members chimed in and said that I should be grateful actually, because the development had cleaned up the eyesore that my land had been. He said the new homes were beautiful and that the community was much better off. Another one said the new houses were already selling and that I just have to accept that the world had moved on while I was out of the picture. I asked him directly point blank, "Are you telling me you own this land?" And the president looked me dead in the eye and said, "Yeah, the HOA owns that land, and there's nothing you can do about it." She told me to stop wasting their time. Now here's where I want to be honest about my own head in that moment. I was furious, I was so angry I could feel my heartbeat in my ears, which after a brain injury is genuinely dangerous, but I was also doing some quick math here, because I just learned something very important in that meeting. These people, every single one of them were absolutely convinced that they owned my land. They believed it down to their bones. The president had said it out loud in front of witnesses. They were not acting like people who had made a mistake. No, they were acting like people who thought they had every right in the world. And they just told me to my face that I had no claim and should just stop wasting their time. So I decided to do exactly what they wanted. I would stop wasting their time, I would accept the world had moved on, I would let them keep doing exactly what they were doing. I want to be clear about why this works, because at first my wife thought I had lost my mind when I told her about my plan. The whole thing hinged on them genuinely, sincerely believing the land was theirs and acting on that belief by sinking enormous amounts of money into it. The more they built, the more they spent, the more they finished, the bigger the hole they were digging for themselves. And by the way guys, that reminds me a little bit of the good old Nvidia quote, the more you buy, the more you save. But in this case, I'm not sure if the HOA is really gonna be happy with that. So basically, if I would shut the construction down right then with a court order, sure, I would have my empty land back, but it would be empty. Just like before, a bunch of half-built frames I would have to pay to tear down, but if I let them finish everything, if I let them pour every dollar into completing those homes and getting them inspected, hooking up utilities, making them move-in ready, then when the truth came out, all of that would be sitting on my land with my deed, so I played dumb for now. I went back up to that HOA office about a week later and I put on the saddest, most defeated face I could manage, which honestly was not that hard because I was exhausted all the time back then anyway. I told the president that I had thought about what she said and that I guessed she was right. I said maybe the land really had reverted to the community since I had not been around. I said I did not have the money or the energy to fight a whole association and their lawyers and that I just wanted to move on with my life. I asked if there was any paperwork I needed to sign to make it official and she lit up. She was so pleased with herself. She told me that was very mature of me and that she was glad I had come to my senses. She said they would have their attorney draw something up if I wanted some kind of acknowledgement that I was releasing any claim. And I said sure, that sounded fine, and I would come back when they had it ready. I never signed a single thing, by the way, that was the bait. I just wanted them to feel comfortable. I wanted them to think the one loose end, the guy who actually owned the land, had given up and gone away. I wanted them to feel completely safe to keep pouring money into my mountain, and boy, did they do that. Over the next several months, I would drive up there now and then just to watch the progress, and I'm not gonna lie, it was kind of fascinating in a sick way. The houses went up fast, they finished the framing, the roofs got the siding on, and they paved out the rest of the road and put in a little cul-de-sac. They even ran power lines and laid water and sewer. They put in driveways, sodded the yards, and planted little trees. They even built a fancy stone entrance sign at the bottom of the new road with the community name on it, and every time I went up there I would remind myself why I was staying quiet. It was hard, I won't pretend it wasn't. There were days that I would watch a crew pour a foundation right where my grandfather used to park his old truck, and I would want to scream at them to stop. But I would think about my attorney's words about how the difference between getting back a torn-up empty lot and getting back a finished neighborhood came down to my patience. So I would grit my teeth and let them keep building. The more they finished, the calmer I got, because every nail they drove in was a nail in their own coffin. And I liked that analogy a lot. A few times an HOA person would see me parked there and come over. I would just smile and say I was saying goodbye to the old place and that I was happy to see it being put to good use. One time the president herself drove up in her golf cart and told me that they were already taking deposits on several of the homes and the two families were planning to move in soon. She said it like she was rubbing it in. She actually said something about how it was nice that I had found peace with the situation, like she was doing me a favor by letting me watch. I just nodded and told her that was wonderful and that the homes looked beautiful. Inside I was doing cartwheels because every word out of her mouth was more evidence for exactly what I had planned. While all this was happening, I was not sitting around. I quietly found myself a good real estate attorney, not their kind of lawyer, a real one who knew property law inside and out, and I brought him the deed, the survey, the title history, the whole box. I told him the entire story. I watched his face go from polite professional interest to genuine disbelief to something that looked a lot like a kid on Christmas morning. He told me that this was, in his words, one of the most clear-cut cases he had ever seen in his career. The land was mine, there was no ambiguity, no gray area, nothing. The HOA had no deed, no purchase, no legal transfer, no adverse possession claim that could possibly hold up given my situation. Simply nothing. They had quite literally built an entire neighborhood on land they didn't own and had no right to. He explained that there's a legal principle about what happens when someone builds on land that is not theirs, and that is when it's done in a situation like this. The improvements, meaning the houses, can become the property of the actual landowner, which is me, and he told me that the smartest thing I had done without even knowing the legal terms for it was letting them finish. Because now I was not going to be left with a torn up piece of land, I was going to be left with a finished move-in ready neighborhood. I asked him if there was any risk they could claim that I'd misled them by playing along, but he said no, this is important because I'd never signed anything, never accepted any money, never made any binding agreement, and I'd actually told them the truth at the very start. I had brought them my deed and I had told them the land was mine. They were the ones who had refused to look at it and told me to get lost. Everything I did after that was just me declining to argue with people who had already made the decision. The law does not require you to save someone from a mistake they are determined to make, especially after you have already tried to tell them the truth and they told you to go pound sand. So we filed the lawsuit. I'm not gonna walk you through every boring legal step because honestly, it's not the most interesting part and I don't fully understand all of it anyway. The short version is that we took them to court to establish that the land was mine and that everything built on it was therefore mine too. My attorney handled the heavy lifting and the HOA of course came in swinging. They had been so confident for so long that I think they genuinely believed they would win. Their whole argument boiled down to the land being abandoned and them improving it for the community. The moment that I will treasure for the rest of my life is when it came time to actually establish ownership and my attorney produced the deed in court, the real one, the original chain of title going back 3 generations with my name on the current one, free and clear, no liens, no transfers, nothing. The HOA side had nothing to put up against it, no deed, no bill of sale. Not even a record of any purchase or transfer because none existed. They had built 36 houses on a piece of paper that said it belonged to me and they'd never once actually checked. So yeah, all of that smugness, all that "stop wasting our time", all that "the world has moved on without you", and it came down to a single piece of paper in a box in my closet that had been there the entire 3 years I was unconscious. They could have looked at it any time, I'd literally offered to show them. They told me to get lost and yeah, it didn't go well for the HOA. The court confirmed that the land was mine and because the homes were built on my land without any legal right, the homes were mine too, all 36 of them. The finished ones, the nearly finished ones, all of it, everything sitting on my property became my property and the HOA was, to put it lightly, completely wrecked by this. They had spent an enormous amount of money building a whole development they now owned exactly none of. The deposits they'd taken from those families had to be unwound, which was its own nightmare for them. There were furious homeowners in their existing community who suddenly realized their HOA board had blown a fortune of community money on a project they had just handed to some guy they had told to get lost. I heard the president did not last long in her position after that. I cannot say I lost any sleep over it, but there's a part of me that almost felt bad for the families who put deposits down on those houses. They were innocent in all of this and they'd been told by the HOA that these were legitimate homes and a legitimate development, and a lot of them had no idea any of this drama was going on behind the scenes. Here's the thing though, and it ended up being the best possible outcome for everybody, except the HOA, I did not want 36 houses to live in. What would I do with 36 houses? So I turned around and I rented them all out, every single one. Some of the families who had originally put deposits down with the HOA ended up renting from me directly, and they were thrilled because their deal with me was actually better and they didn't have to deal with the HOA at all anymore. I sat down with a few of them and explained the whole situation honestly. I told them I knew none of this was their fault, that I wasn't gonna throw anyone out, and that if they wanted to stay, I would make it worth their while. Most of them were just relieved to have it sorted out. A couple of them actually thanked me, which felt strange given I'd basically just inherited their houses out from under the people they thought they were buying from. But I made it a point to be a good landlord, the kind I would wanna have: fair rent, quick repairs, and no nonsense. Word got around that the houses up in the mountain were a great place to live with a great view and a landlord who actually answered the phone, and I had a waiting list before I knew it. My wife handles a lot of the books now, and she likes to joke that she went from spoon-feeding me in a hospital to running a property empire. She has earned every bit of that joke. There were a lot of nights back when I was still in that bed where she could have walked away and nobody would have blamed her. But she didn't, and now we get to do all of this together, and honestly that part means more to me than the money does. And here's the cherry on top: my land was never part of the HOA, it still isn't, so all those houses, my houses, sit on land that the HOA has absolutely no authority over. The same association that tried to swallow my land whole now has a whole neighborhood of homes right next to theirs that they cannot touch, cannot find, cannot make rules for, and cannot do a single thing about. So yeah, every month when those rent payments come in, I think about that president telling me to stop wasting her time. And yeah guys, now I want to share Dexter's thoughts about all of this. So to be honest guys, jokes aside, I still cannot wrap my head around how the HOA's legal counsel allowed something like this. I mean, any basic title search during the permitting process, utility hookups, or bank financing stages should have easily flagged this immediately, right? Did they just hire the HOA president's nephew who passed a bar on his 4th try or something? Or did they simply lie to the board? I mean, building 36 homes without a clear title has to be one of the dumbest things you can do. Would you agree, Dexter? I think Dexter agrees with that. And a user from Reddit said, that is why the "we checked with our attorney" means absolutely nothing unless you know what the attorney actually was told. I would bet money that the HOA did not say anything. They were like, hey, there's a living owner with a deed who is actively disputing this. And they probably said something like, there's an unused adjacent parcel that has always been treated as part of the community common area. We can develop it? Lawyers answer the facts you give them, garbage facts in, expensive disaster out. And yeah guys, I would hope that most lawyers are smarter than the HOA lawyers. Another user in the comments said, the part that gets me is not even the court case, it is just the insane confidence. Like, they didn't quietly make a boundary mistake by maybe 6 feet or something. They built an entire subdivision and then told the actual owner to his face that the land had been absorbed. I would actually love to know what their title company was doing all of this, because there are so many points where a normal person would have asked, wait, who owns this parcel? But instead everyone apparently just accepted the HOA manifest destiny as a legal doctrine. And yeah guys, let me know in the comments what you think about this story and whether you think OP was an a-hole for doing this or if he did the right thing. Let me know in the comments. And the next one is a brilliant malicious compliance story, which is titled, "Don't act like you are doing us any favors." Okay, you got it, buddy. Posted on r/MaliciousCompliance. So to preface this, I'm a contractor and I replace various dispensers in different types of buildings. No matter what the job is, I do not discard the old equipment that I take out without a $1 per unit charge, because I have to take them to the dump, separate the materials, break down the cardboard and so on. So with every job I ask the site lead if they want me to discard it at that cost or if they want to take care of it themselves. If they do not pay, that equipment has nothing to do with me, and as soon as it's off the wall, my only responsibility is to remove it and it's their property to dispose of. Now, the care home I'm working in refused to pay the fee, but still asked me to separate and break down the cardboard. I am nice, so I was doing that. I also organized some of the old equipment onto a pallet and shrink-wrapped it to be easier for them to dispose of. And today, my truck is parked in the back where they specifically told me to park it. The pallet of old equipment is in the garbage disposal area where they specifically told me to put it. And the rest of the equipment is in a pile behind the pallet where, you guessed it, they specifically told me to put it. Someone in maintenance comes and asks me to move my truck because they need access a certain dumpster from that side. Okay, I stop working, come outside, move to the other side of the alley area, and I find the maintenance fleet and ask if it's okay to park there for about 20 minutes as I'm headed to lunch soon anyway, and she says that is perfect. So I'm headed back inside when a man in maintenance clothes who heard that conversation stops me and says the pallet is in the way of a garbage can they need. I say I'm sorry, but that's nothing to do with me, it's not my equipment and I just have to put it where I'm told, but he keeps insisting it needs to be moved. I am a 110-pound woman with no super strength skills to my knowledge or pallet jack, so I'm not sure how he expects me to move a 600-pound pallet, and I tell him as much and again remind him that it's not my equipment and it's just been placed where I was instructed to place it after going out of my way to organize it for them, and he says, "Don't act like you're doing us any favors," which sounds good to me. No more favors, you got it, bro. So I go back in to finish my last bit of work and then come out to grab lunch 50 minutes later, and the pallet has been moved directly behind my truck, blocking me in. Everyone involved knew that was my truck and knew I was headed to lunch soon. If they think I'm gonna come ask them to move it, they are underestimating my ability to match their pettiness, especially after I was told not to do any more favors. So I got in my truck, backed into the pallet until it tipped over into the mountain of discarded equipment that I had not palletized, and went to lunch. I came back from lunch with a newfound freedom from giving a crap about whether the old equipment was the least bit organized. Before I was neatly stacking them to the best of my ability, and now I don't care, bro. I'm tossing crap wherever it is easiest for me, because apparently it's just as inconvenient for them when I organize it. And the next one is a malicious compliance story which is titled, "You Did Not Need My Help." So one of the offices I work for is moving to a new location. I started at this location, worked at it for 4 years, until I was transferred to a closer office. Since they are officially moving next week, they've been packing things up through the week to carry 5 miles away over to their new office, and I've repeatedly offered to help. Yesterday, I made suggestions about helping, offering my truck to carry things, go grab boxes and so on, and every time I was turned down, and the supervisor finally said, "Look, we need you to sit there and deal with patients. We don't need your help with the packing. We got this." Cool. I turned around, did my work, completely ignored issues they were having, and they needed another set of hands a few times and would call my name, but I was suddenly busy with the patient or the phone or whatever else was needed. When they asked about packing some items in particular, I shrugged with no answer. Finally, the supervisor asked if I was gonna help with anything, and I answered, "Nope, I'm just gonna sit here and deal with patients like I was told. As you said, you don't need my help." So today, guess who showed up with a sore back and hobbling? And yeah guys, thanks for watching. I will see you again tomorrow.